And that's the end of the Item Asylum Advanced Melee Guide. Alright, what's next? Oh, here it is. So, you guys kinda went crazy on that melee guide. And so, here we are. Here's the full Item Asylum Advanced Range Guide. You know the drill. If you want a miscellaneous guide, like the video and I'll do it. Without further ado, let's begin. For hitting people with projectiles and throwables, the first thing you should keep in mind is the physical fall off your projectile has. Does your projectile have zero fall off like pineapple, or does it fall off quickly like scrumptious beverage? As you use these weapons, you'll familiarize yourself with their range, but keep in mind that even up close, it's probably better to aim your projectiles at or above the enemy's head. This will not only make the fall off more likely to hit them in the chest, but it also accounts for them jumping, as it will likely hit their leg if it's placed correctly. The only weapon this does not fully apply to is Cinder Block, because for some reason this thing gets thrown at the closest collision to you, so its arc depends on where you aim it. So for that, just aim at their chest or legs. For hitting people with hit scan weapons like MP5 or Chicago, it's all physical tracking and aim. So if you want to get better fundamentally with these, just play Backliner on TC or hit Aim Labs. If you're actively being fired at while using these, you're obviously going to need to spam jump and dodge while shooting at your enemy. But if you aren't being fired at, then I suggest to do whatever you need to study your aim. I don't recommend staying still exactly, but you can reduce your movement to slight strafing or walking. For single shot weapons, especially SSG and Intervention, these are also almost entirely aim based. The only tip I have here is to make sure not to shoot more than 1 or 2 people at once, because if you go around tagging everyone you see with SSG, that's the quickest way to get the entire lobby to dogpile you. Shoot to kill, because these weapons were not made for chip damage. Also, for these weapons and hit scan weapons, stay calm if you get approached. Don't spam shoot at your enemy if they're close to you with a melee weapon and hope for the best. Look at this clip for example. I get pressed pretty heavily by multiple people, but instead of panicking, I recognize that I have enough distance for a shot or two, and then land some pretty impressive hits. Let's start with dodging, because there's a lot to talk about. First is the fact that after projectiles are thrown, they linger on the floor, and if walked on they can still damage you. I've died too many times by just accidentally walking on these things. So while you're fighting someone, it doesn't hurt to just occasionally glance at the floor and make sure you don't faceplant into the ground and die because some stupid pebble decided to fall near you. You can't really abuse this mechanic offensively because the projectile could literally bounce anywhere, but just be aware of it. When facing someone with a single shot weapon, however, dodge in the same way I showed in the melee guide with quick, unpredictable movements. When facing them with an automatic weapon, your best bet is getting into cover. If not, just spam jump and hope for the best, because if your opponent has any resemblance of aim, they're probably going to hit you. Now, when dodging projectiles that are actively being thrown at you, you have a few options. If it's a constant barrage like Christmas or what is the rock cooking, your best bet is to spam jump and dodge side to side. Or if you're the GOAT, you can go face to face and manually dodge every single projectile like you're playing a bullet hell. I actually recommend doing this for slower items like Asylum Treasury Key, because the projectiles don't really move that fast. If it's a slower used projectile like Bottle, these are already pretty easy to dodge by moving in really unpredictable patterns. You can also parry them if you have a weapon that does, which is pretty cool. Another thing you can do while dodging is to fake out the enemy a little bit. If you spam jump throughout a fight, a good player will likely throw their projectile at head level or above to account for you jumping. But if your enemy misses their projectile, you can actually stop spam jumping and walk in one direction for like a second or two. They'll likely switch their aim towards your legs or chest, which then you can spam jump again to dodge. Now on to positioning. When you have a close-ranged melee like Bottle or Supreme Brick, obviously your positioning doesn't really matter because you have to approach other people to kill them. But if you have some of the more accurate, long-ranged weapons like SSG or Etymology, elevation is key. Try to always be above ground level, and also try to not be on flat ground. If you're on a slant or slope, projectiles and other people are going to have a harder time getting to you. Elevation also gives you more time to react if someone tries to attack you. When you get your ranged weapon, you should first figure out its purpose. Is it a weapon you can rely on to single-handedly kill people, or is it more of a follow-up weapon to then kill people with something else? To make this easier to identify in your games, I've broken the ranged weapons up into a few categories. First, you have your primaries. These weapons you can rely on as your primary means of killing due to their damage output. This category includes weapons like AirPod Shotty, the snipers, and all the upgraded killstreak weapons like Pixel Rifle and Micro SMG. Next up are your stunners, or follow-up weapons. These only serve as a tool to immobilize your enemy, so you can kill or stun lock them with a melee. These include most projectiles that do limited knockback like Bow, Supreme Brick, and the Man, while also including weapons that can start combos like Spear and Taser. Our next category are Void Feeders. If you get one of these on a Void map, your entire job is to just stay alive and knock people off the map with these. Now, the last two categories are just weaker versions of the first two. Chip damage weapons are really just weapons that are too weak to have viability as a primary, and don't really stun. These weapons are, as the name suggests, used for chip damage and not much else. These include weapons like Ebony and Ivory, Shopping Cart, and the Killstreak weapons' unupgraded forms like 9mm and Pixel Gun. And lastly, Finishers are weapons that finish your combo and end in a kill. These weapons are basically stunners that do more damage, but have way too much knockback to be followed up on. This category includes weapons like Grind Javelin, Canadian Riot, and Pinger. Use these weapons after you've done around 65 or more damage and your enemy is ragdolled. These also serve as a tool to push people away from you if you are getting chased. Now, this list is not cut and dry. Some weapons like Sero are so unique that they don't really fit into any of these categories, and there's a huge gray area between what is a primary weapon and what is a chip damage weapon. But the purpose of these categories is to give you a better understanding of how you should use each range weapon so you can apply it to your loadouts that you get. So let's review each one in depth. However, I'm not doing extra analysis for finishers and chip damage weapons, because all that needs to be talked about was already explained. With primaries, it's fundamentally aim and movement, which I discussed in the previous sections. So this section is going to discuss specific weapons and how to use them most effectively. AirPod Shot is 8 pellets with 13 damage in each pellet. This means you can one-pelt people, but even at point blank range you're likely only hitting 7 of these. But thankfully, there's 2 shots in this thing, so you have a few options. First is to approach someone using the recoil for this thing, and then use a second shot to kill them. But the problem with this approach is that once you shoot them, they will likely not take all 8 pellets, and the recoil will knock you back too far, making you unable to finish them with the melee. So I only recommend this approach if you know your enemy is below 100 HP. Some better approaches are to A, try and reach your enemy without the shotgun's recoil, and then use 2 shots to kill them, or B, use 1 shotgun shot to reach them, melee them, and then finish them off with your other shot. With realistic MP5, make sure to get at least 50 studs close to your enemy before shooting them. This is because, as you can see in the example, the 50 studs is about the furthest distance away you can shoot before your shots start to miss the target. Also, although headshots do about 30% more damage, I still recommend to aim for the chest, because due to its accuracy, the time to kill even at point blank range is about the same despite it being fundamentally harder to hit the head. Weapons that I also recommend to aim for the chest with, either because they don't offer headshot bonuses or it doesn't change the number of shots to kill, are Etymology, M1911, and 9mm. So with these weapons, just make sure your bullets are connecting somewhere. Makarov is a weird exception though, because although you need headshots to kill someone in one clip, this gun's accuracy is so varied that you'll just have an easier time aiming for the chest and reloading for the kill. Okay, so with stunners, there's a lot of variety with each projectile's cooldown and range, but the first thing I usually do is open up with my projectile, then melee the enemy until my range cooldown ends, then throw the projectile and melee them until you kill them. If you know your enemy is a melee that stuns, then I suggest to open the same way, but actually back off until your range cooldown is over and then kill them. With Void Feeders, your only goal is to knock other people off the map unless you get a weapon with even more potential like Smile. When using these weapons, try to either stay in an extremely elevated place or behind cover. When your cooldown is over, jiggle peek out and knock anyone you see off. Try to aim in the opposite direction you want to push them. So if you want to push them to avoid on the right, aim a projectile at their feet and slightly left. If you get approached and they're too close to you, you have 2 options. If your melee is good and sounds like Lucille, you can attack them with that and then finish them off with your ranged weapon. But if you get like air or something as your melee, then you could just explode you and the enemy and hope that you survive. I'd recommend this only as a last resort, and if there's a wall behind you. The first weapon I have specific advice for is Earth Tome. Now everyone knows that you hold down the spellbook for 45 seconds and get a golem or whatever, but one spell that I think is criminally underrated is the Shield spell. It's the second one you summon, marked by a shield, and gives you 25% defense for 30 seconds. I know that doesn't seem like too much defense, but with that amount, you can actually take an extra hit or 2 for many different items like Crowbar. Our next weapon is Roulette Shotgun. The advice I have for this weapon is that if you load in your shells, you should take different approaches depending on the number of live and blank rounds you get. If you get an absurd ratio like 4 lives and 1 blank, don't bother racking the gun, just use handsaw and hope for the best because your first shot will pretty much always be live. However, if you get more blanks than lives, I suggest to straight up just spam rack the gun until you have 0 blanks and only lives. With moderate luck, you'll end up with 1 live and 0 blanks, and from there you can just solve the barrel and make it a one-hit kill weapon. And then obviously, if you have 0 lives, just rack the gun. Don't spend 3 times longer just shooting nothing. When fighting with King Tusks, keep in mind which Tusk you're shooting. It always starts off with the right tusk when you spawn with it, and then after you shoot both, it's whatever tusk you pick up first, which will always be right. Also, when using this, the sway of your character actually changes its position a little bit. So right before you shoot these, just stop moving for a quick second and then shoot it. Finally is Anchor from the Sky, which can only be obtained by perfect running YEAHH. And what I want to show you is that you can do a full 100 HP combo with this. However, it does start with the reel ability that can be annoying to hit sometimes, but here it is. You open up with the reel, then wait for your enemy to be pulled towards you. Once they are, throw the anchor at them, quickly pick it up, and then dock it on them. This will do a full 100 HP and spawn a minion for you. And that's it for the Item Asylum Advanced Range Guide. If you enjoyed this video and want a miscellaneous guide, please like the video because it helps me out a lot. That's pretty much it, and see ya.